Have you ever witnessed something so petty and outrageous that you couldn't decide whether to laugh or scream? That's exactly what ran through my head as I tightened the final bolt on a 6-foot-tall wooden fence, one that now cleanly split the lakefront in two, slicing through grass, dock, and water like a legal scalpel. Behind me, a dozen stunned neighbors stood speechless, watching this audacious structure take shape down the middle of what was once our shared paradise. On the other side of the fence stood Margaret, cousin to our infamous HOA president Karen, frozen in disbelief. Her jaw hung slack as her luxury loungers and half-finished jet ski ramp were now permanently marooned behind a fresh wall of lumber. What led to this surreal standoff started 5 years ago, when I bought my dream home in Willowbrook Estates, drawn by the promise of deeded lakefront access. The property came with shared rights to a sandy beach and a community dock, both central to my family's summer memories. Every weekend, my kids and I would fish, swim, and play by the water until sundown. That lakefront was more than scenery. It was a part of our lives. Then came Karen Fitzgerald. 6 months ago, she took over as HOA president and wasted no time turning our quiet neighborhood into her personal fiefdom. She wielded her new authority like a battle axe, slapping fines for grass height, banning wind chimes as noise pollution, and requiring written approval for planting flowers not on her pre-approved list. But the real decay started with her web of favoritism. Her brother-in-law was suddenly the official and paid landscape inspector. Her childhood friend snagged the pool maintenance contract. And when her cousin Margaret came for an extended visit, it seemed the HOA rules simply ceased to exist. Margaret quickly claimed the shared lakefront as her own. And I don't mean a folding chair and cooler. I mean full-scale takeover, heavy loungers, tiki torches, blaring speakers, and a private jet ski ramp under construction. The setup blocked the view, obstructed access, and screamed entitlement. I tried to be civil. I introduced myself, gently reminded her the space was shared. She looked at me like I'd just insulted royalty. Margaret said Karen had granted her exclusive rights to her half of the lakefront, since I only used it on weekends. She even waved a paper in my face, a so-called easement reassignment from the HOA, and told me to file a complaint if I had an issue. I was skeptical, so I investigated. That document claimed the HOA had unanimously voted to give Margaret exclusive access, citing better community resource management. Funny, since 2 board members were out of town during that alleged vote. Something stunk. I contacted the city and checked county property records. As I suspected, the lakefront was legally deeded to specific properties, including mine. No HOA vote could override that without formal consent and a legal process. Karen's document wasn't just invalid, it was laughable. At the next HOA meeting, I laid out my findings. Karen's reaction, theater-worthy of an Emmy. Her face turned crimson, hands white-knuckled on the podium. She shrieked that the HOA had amended its bylaws to grant full control of waterfront decisions, and anyone who disagreed will be fined $500 per day. She even waived another bylaw change, allegedly passed in a special session no one remembered. Meanwhile, Margaret's beach empire kept growing. Music blasted from sunrise to nightfall. Her guests littered the shoreline. And when my 8-year-old daughter tried to walk to the water, Margaret physically blocked her, declaring it private property. That moment, seeing my daughter walk back in tears, was the last straw. As a contracts lawyer, this was my battlefield. I buried myself in paperwork, home deed, HOA charter, property survey, meeting minutes. The result? Ironclad proof. Not only was the lakefront deeded to my lot, The HOA charter explicitly stated it held no authority over deeded property. Any interference? Grounds for personal liability. I drafted a certified legal notice and sent it to both Karen and Margaret. 72 hours to remove their junk or face legal action. They laughed it off. The next morning, Karen showed up at my door with Margaret and a man she introduced as their lawyer. He looked like his legal training came from watching reruns of Suits. They tried threats, bribes, even offered to waive my HOA dues for a year. Margaret proposed a shared schedule. The lawyer mumbled something about squatters' rights. I smiled, thanked them for coming, and shut the door. They did nothing. In fact, Margaret doubled down, started building a permanent shade pavilion. So, I launched Phase 2. I hired a licensed surveyor to mark the exact boundaries of the lakefront. As expected, the area was split 50-50, and Margaret's resort sprawled well over both sides. Armed with the survey, I hit the hardware store. The clerk blinked when I explained where the fencing was going. By the time I returned, the whole neighborhood was buzzing. When asked if the rumors were true, I simply said, "Just marking property lines." At sunrise, I was out there with a full crew, permits in hand, survey stakes in the ground. The fence ran straight across the beach, even slicing the community dock in half. It was practical and poetic. Margaret emerged as the panels went up, coffee mug in hand. It shattered on the deck. Followed by Karen, still in her bathrobe and foam curlers, trailed by half the neighborhood. The meltdown? Cinematic. Karen screamed about vandalism, trespassing, even identity theft. She called the police. They reviewed my documents and left. She called code enforcement. No violations. She even escalated it. City Hall, county office. I wouldn't be surprised if she tried the Pentagon. Margaret's setup? Now hilariously dysfunctional. Half a jet ski ramp, speakers split down the middle, a useless shade structure with posts straddling both sides like props in a bad play. That evening, an emergency HOA meeting was held. Karen had circulated flyers calling me a neighborhood menace, but it backfired badly. One by one, neighbors shared their own stories. A retired judge named Tom calmly laid out Karen's many legal violations. Sarah, whose flower garden was bulldozed by one of her projects, brought receipts. Others joined in, exposing her power plays and misused funds. Then Margaret's husband arrived. He took one look at the chaos, fence, furious wife, HOA implosion, and made a decision. They were leaving. He personally supervised the takedown of her setup. Neighbors overheard him muttering that Karen had dragged them into an expensive disaster. Karen made one last desperate move, tried to declare an executive order to remove the fence. That's when the HOA's actual attorney finally spoke up. He flatly stated that Karen had overstepped, exposed the HOA to liability, and must be removed. The board voted unanimously. Karen was out. But it didn't stop there. The HOA pressed charges. Turns out Karen had funneled funds into Margaret's bogus paperwork, skimmed from landscaping budgets, and padded her brother-in-law's checks. 3 months later, Karen stood before a judge, charged with fraud, embezzlement, and breach of fiduciary duty. Verdict: guilty. Sentence: 2 years of probation, 300 hours of community service, and restitution of $47,000. As the judge's gavel fell, Karen broke down in tears. And me? I still sit by the lake some mornings with my coffee in hand, admiring that perfectly straight fence and the peaceful quiet of a paradise reclaimed. If watching Karen's HOA empire crumble gave you life, hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe. You won't believe what happens next.